Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the head of news for the Cradle. As usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and social media manager and content creator for the Cradle, Sima Itaim. So today, we should really discuss what is happening inside Israel. We're seeing fractures deepen. We're seeing complete divisions between the political sphere and the army in their statements in the day after plan for Gaza. We're seeing former officials take fuel, protests calling for a new election. We're seeing claims of an assassination attempt against Netanyahu, of a coup attempt against Netanyahu. All of these things have really intensified over the last couple of weeks. At the same time, as the army is supposedly, the Israeli army is supposed to move away from Gaza and on to Lebanon, right? That's been the threat for a few weeks now. But then the question is also, what is even the plan? And why are we seeing these deepening fractures in Israel?
It started out with opposition figures kind of always, lashing out at Netanyahu. And now it's like, when you're in a war, the army and the government need to be united. So now that it's within, even between the army and the government, that there are these kinds of splits happening and this kind of finger pointing, and the army contradicting what Netanyahu was saying. We haven't seen this earlier on in the war, and this is what makes a difference. And this is what highlights the failure of the army in the war, that there are no clear goals for the actual war itself and for the day after plan. And this is what, within the army they are realizing. And this is why we had comments by people, by officials, army officials, we never thought we'd hear say this compared to the way they were speaking, at the beginning of the war, like Hagari. Hagari was saying that Hamas cannot be defeated, and then that's throwing sand in the eyes. And then Halevi also came out echoing what Hagari said.
Yeah.
And it seems like, they wouldn't just come out and say this like on a whim. They must have some kind of political cover. Maybe from the US, maybe. I don't know what it is, but this is like completely going against Netanyahu's narrative.
Yeah, because the narrative since the start of the war has been we need to destroy Hamas, right? This is even the fact that we have seen so many efforts at a ceasefire deal fail. It's because of this particular reason, right? Netanyahu keeps saying we cannot stop the war until we defeat Hamas. And it's really shocking, honestly, to have the head of the armed forces, these high-ranking army officers come out and say this is fabrication. There was reports saying that I think it was the former ombudsman of the army, right, Yitzhak Brick, who over the weekend said that the officers in Gaza, that the scientists deployed in Gaza, are talking to him directly and saying they are lying to the public. Every time they say we defeat, 200, 300 Hamas fighters, it's not true. We don't even know where Hamas is. We don't come face to face. This is what he's describing. Exactly. And this is the man who a few years ago, we talked about him before on the show, he said the Israeli army is an Air Force army. The ground troops are not ready for to fight an actual war. And now you also have, first you have reservists, that have already served in Gaza, signing a letter. I believe it was 46 of them that signed a letter that said, we will not return to Gaza. And they cite personal issues, they cite, some reservists are losing their jobs because, the Israeli army depends on the reserve force as well as the Israeli economy. And they're also saying, we kill families, we burn down homes. A few of them kind of mentioned that, right? You also there's a new report on Israeli media that says that up to 900 officers, the rank of captain to major, if I'm not mistaken, have asked to resign, have asked permission to resign. Now, this is a figure that compared to previous years, it's a 9-fold increase, because in previous years, it was only between 100 and 120.
Yes, I don't know if what's happening in the Israeli armed forces is like a result of what's happening in Gaza, or there's like a pressure, an external pressure, like the United States, that wants to take down Netanyahu because there's no solution for what's happening, and especially that Netanyahu refused everything. Especially nobody can forget what happened when Hamas approved the
ceasefire deal.
And like after some hours, the Israeli army, of course, under the leadership of Netanyahu, they commenced the massacre in Rafah. So I don't see the end of the tunnel if Netanyahu stays in power, because now they are saying that they want to go to Lebanon, and it's clear that the United States don't want a war between Israel and Lebanon, not because they love Lebanon, but because they have the intelligence to know that Israel can't win a war against Hezbollah. So now we are seeing these small events and small incidents against Netanyahu. Maybe they are preparing the Israeli population, and maybe the word that Netanyahu might resign, or in a month or two something will happen to him, and they are like trying to find maybe a solution or a replacement for Netanyahu, because Netanyahu doesn't want to stop the war in Gaza. Netanyahu said that the troops will remain in Gaza. Netanyahu refused any ceasefire, either if it was from the Gulf countries or from Egypt, from Jordan, or even from the United States, and even proposes that Israelis themselves proposed. He refused it. From the media, we feel that there's a war in Lebanon, but till now it's like psychological warfare. But if he wants to continue into Lebanon, I think forces stronger than him outside Israel, because he's the most powerful. To be honest, he's the most powerful in Israel, and he still has he's still popular in Israel. Maybe external hands will interfere to stop Netanyahu. Maybe may make like a scandal for him, or maybe assassinate him. Nobody knows, but that's how I see it now.
But this is what the wife said, right? Sarah Netanyahu. She's the one that told the families of some of the captives that there's a coup attempt on the way from the army, and then there was also the talk about an assassination attempt against Netanyahu.
Yeah, that he needs like extra like personal security, or like a bodyguard from I don't remember if it was the Shin Bet or who it was.
We've talked about this before, about like the U.S. is becoming increasingly uncomfortable with Benjamin Netanyahu. They do not... from the beginning of his latest presidency or premiership, Biden has kept him at arm's length until October 7th.
I want to go back to a couple things that were mentioned. Like, I understand where Karim's coming from, but there's one thing I disagree with, which is that you're saying you don't know if what's happening is due to what's happening on the ground in Gaza. It might be U.S. pressure. Well, U.S. pressure comes from the Israeli army's failure in Gaza. If the Israeli army wasn't failing in Gaza, the U.S. wouldn't have to pressure the Israeli army, or the Israeli government, or Netanyahu, and we wouldn't have reached this point where we're 9 months in and nothing has been... So it's kind of all connected, in my opinion, that the U.S., it has been forced to take this approach because of the failures, after 9 months. And to go back to what Yitzhak Brik said, not only did he say, we are getting killed, we're not killing them or seeing them, he said, we have not been able to seal the tunnels that lead to the Sinai. We are just there, like they occupied the Philadelphia corridor. But so what does that tell you? How is, and now Netanyahu says he's wrapping up in Rafah so that, we can move on to phase C or phase 3, which is like more concentrated raids and air raids, of course, brutal bombing. And so he's wrapping up, even though they're nowhere near done there. And, of course, he's not admitting that yet. And then also they're talking, like he said in his Channel 14 interview last week, that like they need to move their forces to the north. But so all of this failure they brought a lot of it on themselves. This is because of the internal divisions that we were like tracking before any of this even began. But it's largely due to their failure. And of course, what as has been discussed on this podcast so many times before, the Axis support fronts, all that pressure, the way the U.S. tried to stop those fronts and deal with them separately, when in reality, none of them will stop until everything on Gaza stops. And this is something that, they're still trying to come to terms with. They haven't fully accepted this idea that you can't stop the Lebanon front unless you stop. Like Bahrain said they were calling for a ceasefire in Lebanon, like so rude and ignorant and arrogant, considering that, them assuming that like that'll just end on its own. Like now the support fronts cannot be separated from each other, and the U.S. knows this, and the U.S. is worried for Israel.
On a long term, what happened 7 October and this war on Gaza, it will have a devastating results upon Israel. But we know from the West and from the Americans, especially like Trump and Biden, which one of them will be the next president, both said that the job or Israel should finish that job in Gaza. They didn't even try to stop Israel from doing what it wants in Gaza, because they know maybe the result is on the long term. It's like more emotionally and psychologically what happened in 7 October. But a war with Lebanon would have an immediate devastating catastrophe on Israel. So that's why they don't want the war. Again, not because they love the Lebanese and they are like in good terms with Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. They don't want the war because they know in short term, we will see destruction. We will see like Israelis killed again. We will have another 7 October, and that's what Israel can't hold anymore. So that's why I think all the pressure is happening, and especially the most weird thing that happened like 2 days ago, the Arab League lifted Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. Of course, I don't think Hezbollah told them, please lift me or anybody. They are showing good terms towards Hezbollah. And no, look, we have power. I'm speaking now about the Arabs. We still have power. We can talk to the Israelis. We can talk to the Americans. You can prevent the war. But of course, the Arab League and the Arab leaders, the Americans, the Israelis, with all this technology and their intelligence, they have a very small brain, because it's very clear that Ansarullah, the Iraqi resistance and Hezbollah said, we will stop when the Gaza war stops. Yeah, now they are playing games, stupid games, because everybody knows that the war, the attacks won't stop against Israel unless the Gaza war ends. And that's what they don't want. That's why I'm telling you, they don't care what's happening in Gaza. Maybe if it takes 1 or 2 years, they want to finish the job. But they are afraid of Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah is preventing. He might ignite war in the region. He might ignite World War III, and he might stop the war. So everything is connected to Hezbollah nowadays. From the North Atlantic till maybe North Korea, everything is connected, because we know all the enemies of the United States, they are coming together due to the action of the United States. And if the United States and its allies are weakened in one point, maybe others will try to weaken it in other place. And that's what the United States doesn't want. They will still want to dominate and to be the number one in the world.
I agree with that. And definitely Hezbollah and Lebanon is a whole new level. And definitely the Americans don't care about what happens in Gaza. But the way it's connected is that, let's say Israel has gone through this war with resounding victories and completely succeeded against Hamas, then the morale would be higher to go through with Lebanon. But that's in the sense that they're all connected. That, in a way, the Gaza resistance, we've gathered that if Gaza's resistance falls, Hezbollah will not let that happen. That's because, in my opinion, in a way, the Gaza resistance is kind of a first line of defense for Hezbollah. If the Gaza resistance is defeated, then in a sense, it's not good for Hezbollah. Just like if Hezbollah is defeated, it's not good for Iran. So that's the sense that it's all connected. So the morale is not very high, to be honest, in Gaza. And this crisis in the army, with the enlistment, with the fractures, all of this makes the morale low when it comes to dealing with the threat of a war, a full-scale war with Hezbollah.
And you brought up something that we felt to mention up to this point, which is the enlistment crisis as well. The fact that the Israeli army does not have the numbers that it needs. This is also something that officials in the army, high officials, have said, that they need at the very least a whole new division of soldiers. And this is one of the reasons they're trying to push this whole let's enlist the ultra-Orthodox, although the concessions, continue. And it's highly unlikely to pass. But what I want to bring up quickly is last week, Israeli journalist Alon Ben David wrote this report for Maariv, in which he talks, he's very frank, talking about the reality of the army. And he says that we're not ready for Lebanon. If we go against Lebanon, we're screwed. We're screwed because we're already screwed in Gaza. Again, to your point, something that you said, that they're going to keep control of the Philadelphia corridor. They need to stay in Gaza. They need troops to stay in Gaza. What Isaac Brick said, that we need so many, I don't know if he said months of years to clear out the tunnels. They need to start digging 50 meters under the ground. They just need a completely different strategy. So the Israeli army, in this report by Ben David, he cites an Air Force reserve officer, a senior Air Force reserve officer, saying that this man wrote a letter to Army authorities begging the political echelon begging the Army authorities to explain to the political echelon or to convince them that the Army is not prepared for a prolonged campaign in Lebanon, and saying, if we move on Lebanon, this will lead us to a greater strategic disaster than 7 October, right? And this is kind of like the writing on the wall that has been there for a while. U.S. intelligence has said it. Even the fact that you see the opposition like Benny Gantz or Yair Lapid or whoever saying this, it's because everybody knows this is going to happen. Like in this report, he details this journalist that the Israeli army as an entity, as what it has been built over the past 76 years, is not meant to fight a prolonged war. They work as shock troops. They work as, like the mowing the lawn strategy. So where are they going to get more men? Men and women? Where are they going to get, they depleted their armament. They're continuously depleting their armament, not because the U.S. is not sending enough bombs, which is, something that Netanyahu said in this ridiculous statement, that then the White House had to come out and just be like, what are you talking about it? And then give the numbers, and the numbers are just ridiculous. They've sent 40,000, 2,000-pound bombs. That this is why you're seeing Gaza be flattened in the way that it has. So the reason why they are depleting their ammo supplies is because there was no plan from the beginning. And whatever plan there was, they didn't follow it. They just went completely insane. And another thing is also what's happening in the West Bank. Because in the West Bank, you do have a large contingent of the Israeli army. You have several divisions deployed there. Will Israel even consider removing some of these to go against Lebanon?
No, in my opinion. I mean, they'll remove the ones in Rafah and move them north, but they need the ones in the West Bank, because although the West Bank resistance poses less of a threat due to, the limitations and conditions it's in, it's not a time at all for that, especially when the settler attacks escalating, resistance operations escalating, honestly, to give some credit, the sophistication of their explosives, soldiers are dying in the West Bank, but in general, the situation is getting very, 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 very tense there. Just to give an example, yesterday there was a bombing to assassinate a commander in the PIJ's Tulkarm Brigade in Nur Shams refugee camp. So again, we've talked about this before maybe, but I mean, why would you want to remove troops out of the West Bank, where settlers are becoming more and more terrorist-like, and where you are bombing? And it's not really talked about. There's a lot of underground networks of resistance. They have shallow tunnels. They have whenever someone is martyred, someone else comes out and takes their weapon. It doesn't stop. Why would they move those to Lebanon, the West Bank troops?
But I think they already armed all the settlers.
Yes, most of them, but that's not the same as the army. They don't have the same training. They're not the ones in charge of the checkpoints. You know what I mean? So I just feel it's so tense there that even though we can, recognize that it's not the same level of threat as the resistance in Gaza, they cannot afford right now to do that, because it is about to explode. It's about to explode because they're making the conditions there unlivable.
Yeah, I think what happened on 7 October is the first operation since World War II where the West has no hands in it and they didn't plan anything in it. So usually when they want to, for instance, destroy Iraq, they make this propaganda. And they want to, the UN really has mass weapons of mass destruction, and they prepared the Americans, and they prepared the Gulf media, which was spearheaded by Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya. They also made many documentaries. Saddam Hussein is not good. I'm not saying he's good. Then when they went there and killed 1 million Iraqi, it was okay because they are very bad. And the same thing in Afghanistan. And we have many examples of this. But what's happening now is that there was a war imposed on Israel without them knowing and without the preparation of the United States and the propaganda. So when you go back to the first one, first they said they want to put the Gazans in Egypt, and Egypt refused. And then we started to hear they want to put them in Jordan, and then Jordan refused. And then they said they want to put them in the Negev desert. And then they started to build this pier. And you see that their end plan is not completed yet because we don't feel it. It's very easy, especially if you live in our region. It's very, very easy to know the plan of the West from the media. And now, because the plan is not clear, I'm convinced that still now there's no plan. And especially because we have Al-Hadath in Arabic, we have Al-Arabiya. Usually they are very weak in media. So their anchor gives you the plan, and you can feel it that, oh, my boss told me to say this, and they say it, so you can feel it. Till now, we don't feel it, although they are fully aligned because it's been like 30 episodes and we didn't touch upon this. The Arabic media that's controlled by the Gulf countries, how they are acting and how they are preparing the population for defeat, which we don't see, but they see it. For instance, 2 days ago, I was watching Al Arabiya, and there was a Saudi diplomatic from Jeddah, and he said that we should stop the war with Israel because Israel is a democratic country, and because they allow Muslims and Jews and Christians to go to Jerusalem and pray. But if Arab took the control of Jerusalem, nobody can go there. But of course, the history and the current facts show us the opposite. So they are still like trying to whitewash the Israel, but there's no clear plan. And when we feel that clear plan, I will give it to you.
That's so funny, though, the thing about that, saying that, like, they're the ones who make it the safest.
Yeah.
Which is like, they're supposedly Muslim, and they're speaking against Muslims, saying Israel would be the best. Like, it was literally an Ottoman ruler who made Jerusalem the safest for Jews, and still you have these Zionist Saudis talking like this. But just one thing that you said about how the PR was a complete failure because they weren't ready for 7 October, that kind of disproves this idea that these conspiracy theorists have, that it was like all planned, that 7 October was like an Israeli operation. And so, they might as well say that it was like, Israelis dressed up as Hamas guys and they knew all about it. We know they ignored intel warnings, that they knew some kind of thing was coming up, but not, if they knew exactly what it was going to happen and how the scale of it would be, I think they would have prepared better PR. In my opinion, we saw how they whipped everything up, and Hamas is ISIS, and I don't know, it didn't work, and it failed, it fell apart from the beginning,
Yeah.
And anyway, they don't, what you said also about the plan, that there's no plan, there is no day after plan. This is also why negotiations are failing. This is why Netanyahu doesn't know what to do. There is no day after plan. You have 10 different versions of the day after in Gaza. And I think Gallant went to present his when he was in the US, and you have Gallant's plan, which involves the Arab forces helping out, and then eventually neutral Palestinians will take over the Arab forces. You have Netanyahu's 2035 plan. You have that plan that the Wall Street Journal recently reported on.
The humanitarian bubble.
The humanitarian islands or bubbles, a plan that is gaining currency in the government and military visions, creating geographical islands or bubbles where Palestinians who are unconnected to Hamas can live in temporary shelter while the Israeli military mops up remaining insurgents. So these bubbles they will live in, since they're against Hamas, they will be allowed reconstruction, they will be allowed aid, and then they'll just be fighting Hamas outside of those bubbles or islands, according to them. Now, the reason why all these things fail, like you said, things have been failing. When they tried to get the tribes to work with them, that failed because Hamas completely eliminated that from happening. What does unconnected to Hamas even mean? Hamas is embedded in all the families in the Gaza Strip, knows them all, has connections with them, all the tribes, the police, the administration. It's not going to work,
So I think, what you're saying, Karim, about the PR failing, it's I agree with Sima completely. This is the show that there was no day after plan. This ridiculous thing about the humanitarian bubbles and everything we have seen be rolled out to resolve this conflict, down to the two-state solution, down to the recognition of a Palestinian statehood, by a few countries. There is no end game. There is no actual end game here that gives sovereignty, that gives that returns the dignity, returns the land, gives rights to Palestinians. Because look at what happened last week, right? You had the debate between the two candidates for the U.S. presidency. And of course, the discourse completely became about Joe Biden being a senile old man who cannot, keep a string of sentence together. But this varied what Trump said, right? When he called them a bad Palestinian or a weak Palestinian. He used Palestinian as a slur, right? This is the top-running candidate for the U.S. presidency. The U.S., the world police, the defenders of democracy, etc., etc. we are seeing in real time since before October 7th, the whitewashing of an ethnic cleansing campaign that has lasted for decades. And now you have, as we were saying, the Arab channels and the Western media. You know what happened with the Telegraph article that we discussed last week, that they're trying to make, Lebanese civilian infrastructure a military target. This is all like this is a house of cards that is about to just topple on top of this. And this is, I believe, why there's like this huge panic in Israel, right? And we're seeing it expressed with the army issues and the political issues and the protests and the fact that it's like we're seeing, we saw the former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett tweet over the weekend. So now this tweet essentially begging Israelis not to leave the country. He's telling them, we need to reconstruct. Oh, like so many people are leaving, woe is little Israel and the land for the, the homeland for the chosen people. This is, you cannot undo what's already been happening. They are right now on the highway to their own destruction. And I don't know if I've said this before on the podcast, but, in my view, it's not really going to be the resistance axis who puts an end to Israel. It's not going to be Iran who puts an end to Israel, or the U.S., of course, it's not going to be the U.S. It's going to be Israel. It's going to be themselves against each other.
Which is what Sayyid Hassan has said over and over again, that above all, Israel will be the one who ends Israel. Of course, with the pressure of the resistance axis. But yeah, I mean...
He said it before 7 October.
Oh, yeah. Just to add more to what is happening on the ground in Gaza and these, this resounding failure that the Israeli army is currently, exhibiting to the world. They, are back in Gaza City's Shujaiya, which we haven't seen them in over months, and where they claimed that they had, eliminated Hamas. And Shujaiya is one of those places that's like, remember you guys talked about Jabalia on this podcast? Yes. Shujaiya is like second to Jabalia in northern Gaza in terms of being a very important stronghold for Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Historically, it's been a source of trauma for Israeli soldiers, a death trap even during 2014, the invasion of 2014. And again now, there are complex ambushes taking place. These ambushes take time, they take planning, they take monitoring, they take innovation, and they are not only recycling unexploded F-16 missiles. They are manufacturing inside Gaza. They released a video yesterday of them manufacturing their weaponry, and we know it wasn't filmed before the war because there's a TV screen behind him, and Al Jazeera is playing. And you see like the recent operation of Saraya al-Quds using the F-16 missile. So it's like a sign in the background that shows that this is happening right now. This is not one of our propaganda videos. They are fighting very fiercely, in smaller groups and maybe in a slightly new approach. But this is why the Yitzhak Brick said we don't see them, because they're like ghost fighters right now. And the ambushes are incredible, to be honest.
I think, this is the exact counterpoint, or just like the other side to the Israeli and Western failure in propaganda. We have seen the complete victory of the resistance axis in their own propaganda, in their own, way of showing what's actually happening. We've seen it with the Yemenis, we've seen it with Hezbollah, right, with the videos. And more prominently, yes, we have seen it with the Qassam brigades, we have seen it with the Palestinian fighters, with all of these things they are doing. And just before we move on, one last thing I want to mention is that this whole, view of what's actually happening in Gaza is also what the Israeli army is doing to the Palestinians, right? We have all the claims or the reports from this Det Iman detention facility that include just the most horrific types of torture. And now we have a report that, a video actually, obtained by Al Jazeera, that shows that the Israeli army is dressing Palestinian prisoners as Israeli soldiers, just with a mark on their arm to differentiate them, and sending them into these buildings, into these roads, into these streets that they feel that there's going to be an ambush, so that the ambush that is killing Israeli soldiers in Gaza instead kills the Palestinian prisoners. And so it's not just a failure in terms of communication, communication strategies. Also, we are seeing Israel and by extension the United States commit war crimes, break every single international convention and in the rules of war, human rights in real time. So this adds to everything, right? To this fire that is burning.
Very weird, because Israel is the only democratic country in the Middle East.
Karim, the last time you did this kind of thing on the podcast, they took you seriously. They're not even, they're gonna think you're serious. But anyway, it's funny. Okay.
So that's kind of the situation in Gaza, right? I think we kind of covered it to the extent that the time that we have allows us. But we should also mention what's happening or what's gonna happen in Lebanon, because the threat remains. The Israeli threat remains. Although now there's like it's like we were saying, right? These claims of the Israeli army saying we're not ready. And then you had Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, come back from Washington a few days ago and say that we prefer diplomacy, like kind of admitting what Israel and the U.S. knows. But at the same time, you have Israeli jets over the weekend flying over Beirut, breaking the sound barrier, causing these sonic booms, which is part of the psychological warfare that is being waged against Lebanon. We talked about it last week with the airport, right? With the targeting of the airport. And now we are also, a caretaker prime minister, Najib Mikati. He visited the South on Saturday. And he also said, what's happening here against Lebanon is part of a psychological warfare campaign waged by Israel. The question is this even going to work? Because honestly, here in Lebanon, you walk out on the street, you don't see people in fear. If, people are at the beach looking at in the south. You can see like the bombing in the background. And people are at the beach, with their argile, enjoying, like they see the planes flying over them and they like egg them on, like do the sonic boom. Do they know the Lebanese, the Israelis? Do they understand who they're against?
Some Lebanese are, to be honest, are afraid. But because they are afraid from the propaganda, not from like a certain visual that they saw in a certain video, because all what Israel did is like targeted some journalists and some civilians since the last 9 months. But to be honest, Israel didn't do anything like as powerful as it used to do in the 90s and the early 2000s. So I don't think anybody is afraid. But there's a big amount of the Lebanese media. They are pushing the Israeli narrative that many people going to the TVs and they are saying, we don't want war, Beirut will be the new Gaza, Hezbollah are weak, if Hezbollah attacks Israel or Israel attacks Hezbollah, we want our own government, blah, blah, blah. We have all this. Yeah, they acquire more than 50% of the media, but on the ground they are like less of 10%. So this is the problem in Lebanon. The NGOs and the United States and the Gulf countries especially, they own most of the media in Lebanon. And especially they own many people that, for instance, if a TikToker was famous or whatever, a social media influencer, they will cut him and give him more money and he will do their narrative. So this is part of the problem. But what I want to say is that what I can see or what I predict, if Hezbollah or if Israel launched war in Lebanon, what we will see, I think we will see Hezbollah fighters going inside Israel, occupying parts of Israel. I don't see the Israelis coming to southern Lebanon and like occupying parts of Lebanon, because for various reasons. But number one is that in 2006, if we want to look on a graph or whatever to make it easier, for instance, Hezbollah had like few weapons or few capabilities and few armed groups. And Israel was one of the most powerful armies, and they have their own air force, which is considered one of the best in the world, not also in the region. But the gap in the last 20 years became very, very, very short. And for instance, Israel is still using the F-16s. Now they have the F-35s. And I'm happy they have the F-35s because I think they will fall without us, without Hezbollah targeting not us. Yeah, so they have the same weapons. They have like more advanced maybe radars. But what Hezbollah acquired in the last 18 years is like they had only Katyusha and some. There's a Hezbollah spokesman who said on the TV 3 days ago that they had only 10 Cornet launches in 2006, and they managed to destroy all these Mirkamas. Now, Hezbollah won't launch like one missile against America, but they will launch 2 or 3 missiles. And they already have their own division, what's called the Radwan division. And it's run, and Said Hassan said it, and they say that our run is to enter Israel, northern Israel. And I think they will do it.
You mean they would storm the northern Galilee in the event of a full-scale war?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense that you were saying that
I think all the border, not only all the border.
That the whole Galilee.
Not only east, west,
no.
finger.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It makes sense because right now we see that actually the buffer zone is in enemy territory, not in Lebanese territory. So of course it would make sense that they would storm rather than that Hezbollah would storm the Galilee rather than Israelis coming in and occupying parts of southern Lebanon.
Israeli army, all the enemies of Israeli army, unfortunately, are non-state actors because, to be honest, Arab leaders are pussies. So individuals took to their hands to defend their land. And we saw people from Iran, of course, the Iranian government helped them, and not only the Iranian government, but I know that even people from the Gulf that have money, they support some factions. But they don't say it. So what's happening is that the Israeli army is not prepared after all of that for guerrilla wars, and they don't have infrastructure underground. So whatever Israel bombs in Lebanon or for Hezbollah, it will be Hezbollah will be underground, and it will be ineffective. But now, and as we saw from Hezbollah, the videos that they released, they can target airplanes, they can target warships, they can target many sensitive things.
They can make Israel uninhabitable in 70 days.
Yeah.
That's what Israeli officials say.
So then the question is, we've established that that launching a full-out war on Lebanon would kind of be a suicide mission right now, considering the state that the Zionists are in. But so then the question is, because you can't also underestimate your enemy, you can't assume that Israel will not do anything. So the question is, what would a limited operation after wrapping up Rafah? What would a limited operation in Lebanon look like, in your opinion? Because I don't believe that they're not going to do anything at all. That is like the end of Israel officially if they do nothing. So it would be some kind of limited operation. They have a target bank, they'll assassinate more commanders, target more warehouses.
Exactly. I think it's unlikely to see at the very least, in the beginning of it, to see a ground attack. It's just going to be intensified air campaign, right? They've threatened Beirut. They've already been bombing, north in the Bekaa Valley. They've hit the entrance of Tyr a few days ago of the city in the south. So I think we're just going to see this right now. Like the Air Force Army is going to act like an Air Force Army.
It depends on their goal. If they want to not eliminate, but if they want to weaken Hezbollah, they have to invade. There's no other option. As they did in Gaza, you have to look to go to the mountains. Where's the tunnel? Where's the launching pad? An air campaign on Lebanon will only kill civilians and infrastructure.
And commanders.
It will not weaken Hezbollah.
Exactly.
It depends on the goal. If they want to destroy Lebanon, I won't say that they can destroy Lebanon, but if their goal is to defeat or at least weaken Hezbollah, they have to do a ground invasion.
But you have also, just like as a very small parenthesis here, what the Iranian UN mission said over the weekend. They said, if Israel expands the war on Lebanon, they face an obliterating war, and all options are on the table, including the entire resistance axis. The Iraqis have already said we will back Hezbollah. The Yemenis, we know, are going to expand their operations. Now there's reports in Israeli media saying that they fear the Yemenis are expanding their influence in North Africa. So it's like, this is really like reality closing in on them.
Yeah, we said the same thing before all these officials announced that they will support Hezbollah. We said this in our last episode. We said that it won't be only between Hezbollah and Israel, but now we are talking about if it happens, what Hezbollah and Israel might do. But we mentioned last time that we might see the borders opening from Iraq to Lebanon.
Syria.
We'll see Syrians, the Iraqis, Taliban, even Afghanis, Pakistanis. There's many people who said they are ready to fight Israel. So, and of course, they are individuals or factions. They are not state actors or officials because, of course, again, because Arabs are pussies.
Okay, yeah, you said do they want to defeat, do they want to weaken? I think that in 2006, their goal was to eliminate Hezbollah and they failed and they know that they failed. So I think now it's just to push them back. I really don't think they have the goal of weakening or maybe weakening, but pushing back, I think, is more of a priority than weakening or definitely not defeating because that's been ruled out.
How long is it going to take to weaken it, right? In Gaza, they're stuck. They're saying at least 6 more months. We know it's not going to be 6 more months. It's going to be way longer than that. In the West Bank, they've been stuck for 30 years, something like that, just decades. And now they want to get stuck in Lebanon too. And the question here, to me at least, is this just an attempt to force the United States to come in and then start waging war against Lebanon?
Netanyahu, yes, they think that's the head of the snake, and it should be cut off, and they can't do it alone. They need the United States. And what they are planning, or they don't even want to plan. I think if Netanyahu says to Americans, we want to go to war with Iran, even though if they say no, they will be obliged to help him in this war. But Israel is not the United States, it's not Russia. Russia and the United States, they can win a war, they can lose a war, and they will stay a great country. But Israel, if it loses another war, it will not exist.
It's the 80-year prophecy.
We know how they are there. They are there because of many reasons, of course. But the main reason is that it's a safe haven for the Jews. It's a very healthy and economically developed country. And of course, they have these weird programs. It's very weird. And if our listeners don't know, they can go search it. Is that they got any Jewish guy or girl in any university, especially in the United States and the West, they give them money. They send them to Israel for 10 days for free. And of course, they show them only the positive side of Israel. And when they graduate, they give them money to come to Israel and work. So that's how they maintain the population there. That's one of the way. But there's many ways. That's one of the way. Now, if I am the PR or if I'm the one who's behind this, how can I now, in this situation, get a software engineer from the United States to Israel? You can't.
How do you get the Israeli software engineer to stay in Israel, right?
Yeah. And we have to know also, I don't know if it's still present, but at least till 2 years ago, you ask software engineers and engineers in general, the number one preferred destination was Israel. They give them the highest money.
Okay.
But now also it's very difficult. That's why we see that they are technologically advanced, because they do what the United States does, but in a smaller scale.
So I think that's a perfect place to stop this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure to leave a like, to subscribe, to follow us on Instagram, on Telegram, and on X. And if you're feeling generous, please make sure to leave a donation on our Patreon. For the Cradle News Roundup, my name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sima Itayib.